Module 1, Introduction to the Special Education Process in Fairfax County Public Schools, Child Find to Eligibility. Within Module 1, we will discuss the pre-referral process, referrals for special education, the local screening committee and its processes, assessments, eligibility, and the reevaluation process for current special education students. The special education process in Fairfax County begins with a referral. Once the parent or educator refers a student to the local screening committee, the team has 10 business days to meet. If the parent or guardian cannot meet during this time, the team will meet without the parent or guardian and inform them of the outcome. The parent may ask the LSC to meet again to gather input. Anyone can make a referral, either orally or in writing. We do this because we have a child find obligation. By regulation, Fairfax County Public Schools is required to identify and potentially evaluate any student or child suspected of having a disability. Within the school, a school team may utilize a child study approach to support students that have academic or behavioral weaknesses that may not rise to the level of special education evaluation, but require interventions or accommodations. However, if a disability is suspected, the school team or parents may request a local screening committee meeting. The purpose of the LSC is to review all available information regarding the student, making sure to solicit parent input in order to determine whether or not there is sufficient information to warrant evaluations for special education and/or Section 504. While there's no countywide required pre-referral intervention process, most schools are using the MTSS model, multi-tiered systems of support. The key is that the process provides strong documentation or evidence of the interventions. Saying that a student needs help without data that indicates that, as the case, is unacceptable. If you are using the MTSS model, please be sure to follow best practice and the guidance you received for this process. Tier 1 includes high-quality core instruction encompassing the content knowledge, skills, and understandings that every student needs in order to be a career and college-ready student. In FCPS, core instruction includes differentiation, scaffolding, and reteaching opportunities that address students' academic, behavioral, and wellness needs. At Tier 2, the focus moves to targeted intervention. In addition to core instruction for small groups of students with like needs, students receive support 2 to 3 days a week for up to 30 minutes a day. There's good progress monitoring, which is systematic to measure academic and behavioral performance over time and to evaluate the student's progress toward an established learning goal. Data-informed decision-making, the ongoing process of collecting and analyzing data to guide instructional decisions and the development of action plans required to meet the needs of all students. At Tier 3, the focus moves to individual intense student needs in basic skills areas that, in addition to core instruction, will allow the student to progress. At this tier, the duration, frequency, and intensity of the interventions increase. Students may receive support up to 4 to 5 days a week for up to 45 minutes a day. It does include progress monitoring and data-informed decision-making, similar to Tier 2. When collecting data, it is advisable to have a record of what transpired over 6 to 9 weeks. This is the standard for observing specific behaviors, but may be adapted as appropriate. Just as a reminder, the use of MTSS, RI, or referral strategies may not delay a referral to local screening or the evaluation for special education or Section 504. They can occur simultaneously, and the data can be used to help determine eligibility. There is guidance from the state and the division around the pre-referral intervention process for English learners. This is a quick glance at the process for intervention for ELs. You can find more detailed information in the VDOE Handbook for Educators of English Learners with Suspected Disabilities and FCPS Regulation 2217. It is important to note that these processes and procedures are not intended to limit any student or parent rights. A referral to the local screening committee may be made at any time. The L consultation provides school teams with tailored information and guidance and support for meeting the needs of Ls who are experiencing ongoing academic challenges. The L consultation is customized to meet the school's needs and seek to support teams in seeking solutions for Ls within the MTSS framework. Referral sources. Once again, anyone can make a referral. It does not need to be a family member or a school staff person, and referrals can come in many forms and lead to a variety of processes. Every parent referral, however, must go directly to the local screening committee. Referrals could be on our standard form, the multi-purpose referral form. They could be in an email. They could have been part of a conversation or a letter. Those referrals could go to child study, the local screening committee, specific service providers, an attendance officer, could be made for a dual language assessment, or the medical services review team, MSRT. The referral goes to the local screening committee typically when a referral is made that indicates that interventions have been unsuccessful and a disability is suspected. In the absence of intervention data, the matter may be referred to the student support team. However, the use of MTSS pre-referral strategies may not delay a referral to the local screening committee or the evaluation for special education or Section 504. They can occur simultaneously, and the data can be used to help determine eligibility. A local screening committee must be established in each school to review referrals for special education and to identify the needs of students experiencing academic difficulties. Our child find obligation extends to all students for whom there is a suspicion of disability, whether the student may qualify as having a disability under IDEA and/or Section 504. The local screening committee will review records and other performance evidence of students being referred to make recommendations to meet the student's educational or behavioral needs and/or determine whether an evaluation for special education or Section 504 is warranted. You may have data such as informal and informal classroom-based assessments that can be compared to school, county, or state norms. For example, informal reading assessments, writing samples scored with an SOL-based rubric, mathematics screening instruments. You may have group-administered norm and criterion reference tests, including the COGAT, the Neglieri, SOL assessments, primary and upper developmental reading assessments, the DRA2 or DRA word analysis, or the K assessment, or the developmental spelling analysis. We need to make sure that we do not include the protocols from the DRAs in the evidence, as those are proprietary. These are considered secure testing documents and are not to be provided to the parents. The rubric or continuum sheets can be provided, but that's all. Supplemental individually administered norm reference educational tests administered by the specialist, such as the reading teacher. Anything informal should have some written documentation so that the information can be interpreted and shared with others. STEM students may have the current information from standardized assessments, such as the Woodcock-Johnson Reading Mastery, or the Kaufman Test of Educational Aptitude. To initiate the local screening process, typically a multi-purpose referral form, SC-SC5, is used to document the concerns of the referring party. However, referrals can be made verbally via email or smoke signal. It doesn't matter how the referral comes in. If there is a box or a line, there is a reason. So make sure to complete the entire form. Parents may fill out page 1, or someone may do it for them. The process is not held up while waiting for the parent to fill out page 1 of the multi-purpose referral form. Page 2 must be completed. It is not optional. Only school staff members fill out page 2 of the multi-purpose referral form. Again, fill out as much as you possibly can based on the information in the child's scholastic record. This is the documentation that the record was reviewed and that the relevant information is being addressed by all committee. Do not fill these out and leave them sitting around waiting for a certain point in time. These should be filled out and submitted at the same time. Reminder, timelines are not optional. The local screening committee has 10 business days to meet to consider whether they suspect a child has a disability under IDEA and or Section 504. If the local screening committee suspects the student has a disability and may be eligible for special education, it has up to 65 business days to evaluate and determine eligibility. If the student is eligible, an IEP must be developed within 30 calendar days. The same timelines apply to the Section 504 evaluation, qualification, and plan development. This is the upper portion of the multipurpose referral form for your information. I draw your attention to the upper right-hand corner. The date referral received box is not the date it was completed, but the date received by the designated school staff member. The date after the referral is received is day 1. The school team must respond to any referrals within 10 business days of receipt and complete the multipurpose referral form. Parents are not required to complete this form. School teams will complete it upon receipt of the referral if the parent did not use the multipurpose referral form for their referral. We do get a lot of questions about being day 1. So let's see what that looks like on the calendar. If we receive the referral on October 15th, you can see that that October 29th is the 10th day. You can also see that October 16th is day 1. Don't forget, you can run the timeline report and see stars. Here you can see that the 10th day is still October 29th. This is the bottom portion of the multipurpose referral form. If the referral is sent to other, such as a child's study, the other box is used to document the action that will be taken, by whom, and what the date ranges of that action will be. As a school team, you are tasked with determining who should be in attendance for the local screening committee meeting. All FCPS staff members who are sitting at the table are part of the team. Virginia regulations require that the following members make up the local screening committee team: the referral source, as appropriate, principal or principal designee, at least one teacher, and at least one specialist. One member of the team must be knowledgeable about the alternative interventions and about the procedures required to access programs and services that are available to assist with children's educational needs. Other members may be included according to the school division's procedures or when the school division determines that the special needs of a child identified in the referral request requires additional information that should be provided by individuals with specialized training or specific knowledge. FCPS general practice is that these staff members, principal designee, general education teacher of the student, special education teacher, a school psychologist, school social worker, person initiating the referral is appropriate, other staff members is appropriate, and the parents are notified of the meeting and are encouraged to attend and participate, are part of the local screening team. The local screening chair, who should be a special education teacher, can fulfill the role of either a special education teacher or the principal designee, but not both. There are other team members who may be appropriate to sit a local screening committee meeting depending on the concerns regarding the student. It is not the expectation that a speech and language pathologist attend every local screening committee meeting. The speech and language pathologist or any other related service provider should attend meetings when concerns regarding the person's area of expertise are present. Or principal's designee is a representative of the local educational agency who is qualified to provide or supervise the provision of specially designed instruction to meet the unique needs of children with disabilities, is knowledgeable about the general education curriculum, and knowledgeable about the availability of resources of the local education agency. Please remember that this role must be present at the entire meeting. In addition to these regulatory requirements, it also makes sense that the person who serves this role does not fulfill another role on the local screening team. We need to make sure that the person fulfilling this role is not a beginning special education teacher, as they are not yet knowledgeable about the last two items on the list. If the decision is that evaluations are necessary to determine special education eligibility, The following forms must be provided to the parent: the Local Screening Committee Report, SSSE 14, and the Notice and Consent for Evaluation, SSSE 2. The Local Screening Committee may decide, after deciding whether or not to test, that it is appropriate to consider 504 qualification. The Local Screening Committee determines which assessments should be conducted in order to assist with the eligibility determination. Be sure to assess in all areas of suspected disability. If you happen to refer a student for a medical evaluation and the parent decides to have the Department of Student Services pay for it, please contact Due Process and Eligibility. Once the decision is made to proceed with an evaluation and the appropriate paperwork has been provided to the parents, it is time to organize for completing assessments in order to prepare for eligibility. Should the Local Screening Committee determine that a special education evaluation is warranted, they will likewise determine the assessments necessary to ensure that the child is assessed in all areas of suspected disability. They will also determine when a staffing will occur and the eligibility dates within the 65-day timeline from the date of referral. Should the Local Screening Committee make a determination not to evaluate, they will be asked to make instructional recommendations. Share the results with the referral source as appropriate, and if appropriate, the Local Screening Committee can pursue initial Section 504 qualification, but the student remains a general education student. Parent consent. Informed parental consent is required before conducting an initial evaluation or reevaluation, including functional behavior assessments, at an initial eligibility determination or change in categorical identification, at the initial provision of special education and related services, at any revision of a child's IEP, and any partial or complete termination of special education and related services except for graduation with a standard or advanced standard diploma. Your role during the evaluation process may be minimal. Although exact responsibilities in this process may vary from school to school, you need to stay informed as to where everyone is in the evaluation process so that you can be a knowledgeable case manager, team member, and speak confidently with parents regarding the process. Once testing is completed, it is advisable for the school to conduct staffings prior to eligibility meetings. This is the staff's opportunity to review the data and discuss its implications. No decisions are made at staffing, but it is the place to ask questions and gain answers to help the decision-making at the eligibility meeting. The school psychologist typically conducts an interpretive meeting with the parents. Usually the same information is shared with the family that is shared at the staffing. The data is presented to the parents so questions can be answered. The staffing and/or interpretives may also conclude that further testing is required prior to eligibility. Parents must have access to completed evaluation reports at least 3 days in advance of the eligibility meeting. The eligibility committee, similar to the local screening committee, must be comprised of the following people: principal or designee, the special education teacher or speech and language pathologist if a speech-only eligibility, a general education teacher of the child, the psychologist, a referral source if appropriate, other professional staff as appropriate, and of course the parents. The eligibility meeting must occur no later than 65 days from the date of parent referral or the date of the notice of reevaluation for current special education students, and must occur within 3 years of the previous eligibility for those special education students. Teams are strongly encouraged to meet prior to day 65 to account for student absences, snow closures, and school and parent scheduling conflicts. At the meeting, teams review and complete the basis for committee decision worksheets for all area of suspected disability to determine if the student meets the criteria for a specific disability. You should complete Module 6 regarding the basis for committee decision worksheets for each disability category. The Commonwealth of Virginia recognizes 14 areas of eligibility. Again, Module 6 will cover the basis for committee decision worksheets. Following an initial eligibility, parental consent is required when the student has met the eligibility criteria for special education. If the parent provides consent, an individualized education program, IEP, meeting must be held within 30 calendar days from the eligibility meeting date. If the student has met eligibility criteria for special education, but the parent does not provide consent via signature on the special education eligibility form, the student is not eligible for special education and an IEP meeting is not convened. If the student has met eligibility criteria for special education, parental consent is not obtained, the parent has not signed the special education eligibility form in any manner, the IEP team must offer to convene an IEP meeting and propose a draft within 30 calendar days from the eligibility meeting date. Special education services cannot commence unless the parent provides written consent for eligibility and the implementation of the initial IEP. For current special education students, a reevaluation is conducted on a triennial basis or at parent request or when staff members have concerns about special education services and supports. A reevaluation is the process of considering all available information, both prior and current, and deciding whether there is sufficient information to determine continued eligibility for special education, considering eligibility criteria, and making an eligibility determination. This reevaluation may include a review of existing data, review of standardized testing, both group or individualized, informal assessment data, parent-provided information, including private assessments if available. Again, a reevaluation is conducted at least once every 3 years when a student's educational needs warrant a reevaluation or when the parent or teacher requests one. Reevaluations must be initiated with enough time to complete the process by the reevaluation date. If the IEP reevaluation team initiates the process more than 65 days out, they only have 65 days to come to eligibility. If the parent referred the student for a reevaluation, the 65-day timeline begins when the referral is received by the student's case manager, the school's administration, lead teacher, department chair. If the school initiates a reevaluation, the 65-day timeline begins with the date of the notice of reevaluation meeting, no longer the date of the meeting itself. For example, let's take a look at the reevaluation timeline. If the school team triggers a reevaluation on the 6th, or they receive a parent referral on the 6th, they have 65 days to complete that process, and so would complete that process on the 9th. This student's reevaluation is due by April 9th, 2020. If we wanted to have 65 days to complete that process, we would need to trigger this student's reevaluation by January 6th. If we did not trigger that process by January 6th, but instead waited and triggered that process on February 3rd, notice that we do not have 65 days, but rather only 48. If we receive a parent referral or decide to trigger this process earlier, let's say November 18th, our 65th day would then be March 2nd. We do not have until the 9th. Similar to the local screening committee, the reevaluation committee must include a principal or principal designee who is qualified to provide or supervise the provision of special education, is knowledgeable about the general education curriculum, and knowledgeable about the availability of resources in Fairfax County. Other required members include the child's special education teacher, a general education teacher of the child, and any other professional staff as appropriate who may provide services to the student, such as a speech and language pathologist. A psychologist is not a required member of the team. Work with your department chair, lead teacher, or mentor to understand the process for including a psychologist in your reevaluation meetings. In some buildings, the team includes the psychologist as a matter of routine if the student has not been tested in 4+ years, but this does not mean that the team will not consider testing if it has been less than 4 years. It is just less common. Parents must be invited, and if the parents are separated or divorced, both parents must be invited unless there's a reason not to do so. Parents may include whoever they choose. Should a parent bring a guest with them to the meeting, please obtain consent for their participation using the Parent Consent for Disclosure of Student Information Form, SSSC 79A. Other reevaluation committee members may include the social worker, reading teachers, school counselors, classroom teachers, speech and language pathologist, public health nurse, ESOL teacher, physical therapist, occupational therapist, adaptive PE teacher, if appropriate. During the reevaluation process, the team will determine either that additional data is necessary, in which case they will propose evaluations and then move to eligibility. However, if no evaluations are required, no additional data is needed, the team will move directly to eligibility. There are 3 possible outcomes for the reevaluation meeting. There should be no official expectation regarding the preferred outcome of reevaluation meetings. It is a team decision. Come to the table with an open mind. The first determination a reevaluation team can make is that no additional data is required to determine continued eligibility. By making this decision, the team is saying we have sufficient documentation to make good eligibility decisions. Sufficient documentation might generally include such things as recent standardized assessments from the last reevaluation, service provider reports, narratives, observations, work samples, SOL scores, etc. The committee must make a decision at the meeting about the need to have an IEP meeting. This is documented on page 2 of the Special Education Eligibility Form, SSSE 10. This must be checked off at the meeting as it is a committee decision. Whatever the decision, it needs to be implemented. The second determination the reevaluation committee may make is that no additional data is required to determine continued eligibility, but additional data is requested for IEP purposes. By making this decision, the team is saying that they have sufficient documentation to make a good eligibility decision. However, they need updated information as to present level to complete the IEP process. So the team will consider both the eligibility process and seek consent for testing for IEP purposes. As a reminder, if at the reevaluation the proposal was for no additional data for eligibility determination, but the IEP team did request additional data for IEP purposes, then the selection should be to convene an IEP meeting. The best practice in FCPS is to complete assessments requested for IEP purposes within 30 days. However, teams do have up to 65 days if necessary. The assessment results must be considered through an IEP process. The third determination or outcome for reevaluation is that additional data is required to determine continued eligibility. This option is used when it is decided to test the students. Reevaluations must be completed by their triennial due dates or within 65 days of the date of the letter to parents for reevaluation determination. Parent consent must be obtained before assessments can be conducted. This permission is secured using the Notice and Consent for Evaluation SSSE 2 form. Parents have the right to refuse some or all of the assessments recommended. Parents do not have the right to require the division to use specific assessment instruments. This is within the purview of the examiner. Following a reevaluation of the student's eligibility, parent consent is not sought if there is no change in the areas of eligibility for the student. If the areas of eligibility have changed, either removal or addition of an area of eligibility, parents must provide written consent for that change. If the parent does not provide consent for a change of eligibility, the student remains eligible under the current area of eligibility and the team must provide prior written notice. If the parents only provide consent for part of the change in eligibility, the student's eligibility changes based only on the partial agreement and the team must provide prior written notice. If the student no longer met the criteria for any area of eligibility and the parent does not consent to the complete termination of services, the student remains eligible for special education and the team must provide prior written notice. At the completion of an eligibility meeting, prior written notice should be provided when the team does not reach consensus with the parent regarding eligibility determination. Eligibility determination is ineligible following an initial or reevaluation eligibility, complete termination of eligibility, and at parent request. All FCPS employees have an obligation to keep student information confidential. Share or disclose only when authorized by FCPS policy and the law, and notify your supervisor if student information has been released inadvertently. Now that you have completed Module 1, you are eligible to begin Module 2 for Case Manager Access, Module 6 for Eligibility Access, or Module 9 for Related Service Provider Access. As there may always be unique situations you may encounter, please remember there is support available. Each school has an assigned procedural support liaison who provides training and direct support. Staff members and families may contact their PSL or the specialist at Due Process and Eligibility for further guidance. Additional contacts and resources are listed here as well.